Have you ever walked past a beautiful garden and noticed that all the onion tops were snapped in half and the garlic leaves were tied into weird tight knots? You probably thought the gardener had lost their mind, or maybe a wild animal had a wrestling match in the vegetable bed. Today, we are talking about exactly why I intentionally break my onion tops and tie up my garlic. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will learn a bizarre but incredibly effective secret that will double the quality of your harvest. We are going to look at a method that completely goes against everything you thought you knew about keeping plants looking pretty. Many people believe that a healthy, green plant should never be touched or damaged. But what if I told you that hurting your plants just a little bit at the right time is the exact key to unlocking massive, supermarket-sized bulbs? Let me know in the comments right now, have you ever intentionally bent your vegetables, or do you let nature take its course? Let us see who is on team intervention and who is on team hands-off. Before we get our hands dirty, let us set the stage and look at where this unusual practice comes from. For hundreds of years, farmers and homesteaders across Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean have been manipulating their root crops. Long before we had chemical fertilizers or advanced soil testing kits, people relied on strict observation and passed down generational wisdom. They noticed that plants have a very specific life cycle, driven by the changing of the seasons and the length of the days. The key players in our story today are the allium family, specifically the common onion and the hardneck and softneck garlic varieties. These plants are survivalists. Their entire goal in life is to store enough energy in their underground bulbs to survive the harsh winter and reproduce the following year. Modern agricultural science has finally caught up with what those old farmers knew intuitively. The practice of bending and tying is all about forcing the plant to stop acting like a leafy green vegetable and start acting like a storage vault. Let us break down exactly how this works and why you need to start doing it. Let us dive right into the fascinating world of plant energy and how it directly affects your garden harvest. To understand why we do these strange things, we first need to look at how plants distribute their internal resources. Every green leaf on your plant acts like a tiny, incredibly efficient solar panel. These panels absorb sunlight and convert it into vital sugars and starches through the daily process of photosynthesis. For the majority of the growing season, the plant uses this energy to grow taller, produce more foliage, and establish a strong system. But there is a very common myth among beginner gardeners that we must address today. Many people falsely believe that having massive, towering, bright green leaves all the way up to harvest day guarantees a massive bulb underground. This is simply not true. In reality, once the bulb starts forming, those beautiful green leaves can actually become a huge liability. Think of it like a business that keeps spending all its profits on fancy office decorations instead of putting money into the company vault. Our goal is to force the plant to stop investing in the leaves and start putting all that valuable energy into the bulb. By intervening physically, we send a clear, unmistakable signal to the plant that the growing season is officially ending. We are essentially hacking the internal delivery system of the vegetable. We take control of the energy flow to guarantee the absolute best results for our hard work. Now, let us look specifically at the anatomy of an onion to see how this energy transfer happens. The onion bulb that we eat is not actually a traditional root, even though it grows under the dirt. This brings us to a major myth that fools a lot of people. Many gardeners think the bulb is just a fat root soaking up water from the soil. The truth is, the onion bulb is actually made up of modified, fleshy leaves that overlap each other. The real roots are those tiny, hairy strings at the very bottom. The green stalks you see above ground are directly connected to those fleshy layers underground. Every single green leaf corresponds to one layer of the onion bulb. Think of the entire plant as a rechargeable battery. The green top is the charging cable, and the bulb is the battery itself. When we bend the neck of the onion, we are essentially crimping that charging cable. We are telling the plant that no more solar energy is going to be collected. This forces the plant to immediately drain whatever sugars are left in the green top straight down into the battery. If we do not crimp that cable, the plant might stubbornly keep trying to grow new green leaves, which makes the bulb smaller and softer. We want thick, dense, heavy onions, not a bunch of useless green tubes. Moving over to our other pungent friend, Let us examine the anatomy of the garlic plant. Garlic behaves similarly to onions, but it has a much stiffer, more rigid structure, especially if you are growing hardneck varieties. A widespread myth in the gardening community is that garlic will just naturally die back and cure itself perfectly if you just ignore it. While it will eventually die back, ignoring it often leads to split skins and a shorter shelf life. The garlic stalk is a very thick pipeline, constantly pumping nutrients up and down. By the time midsummer rolls around, the garlic bulb has formed its individual cloves. At this stage, the plant has a choice. It can keep pushing energy up to keep the tough leaves green, or it can push it down to fatten the cloves. To illustrate this, imagine a highway with two-way traffic. We want to put up a roadblock that stops all traffic going up and forces all the cars to turn around and go down into the city center, which is the bulb. When we physically manipulate the garlic leaves by tying them in a knot, we are creating that roadblock. We are restricting the upward flow of water and nutrients. This mechanical restriction forces the plant to abandon its upper foliage and focus entirely on maturing the cloves that are already sitting in the ground. So, what actually triggers these plants to start making bulbs in the first place? It is not just about the passing of time. The trigger is a combination of day length and rising summer temperatures. Here we run into another classic gardening myth. People often think that dumping a ton of nitrogen fertilizer on their onions in late summer will force them to grow bigger bulbs. Doing that is actually a terrible mistake. Nitrogen promotes leafy green growth. If you add it too late, the plant will ignore the bulb and just grow huge, beautiful leaves. To give you a clear example, think of the plant as having a built-in alarm clock. When the days get long enough, the alarm rings, telling the plant to stop making leaves and start making a bulb. Our physical intervention of breaking and tying acts like a snooze button that we smash to silence the alarm and finish the process. We are telling the plant, yes, we know it is summer, now finish the job. If we let the plant keep access to unlimited nutrients and straight, healthy leaves, it might get confused by a late summer rain and try to start growing again. By snapping the neck or tying the knot, we make it physically impossible for the plant to revert to its leafy growth phase. Let us talk more about the specific problem with late-season greens on your crops. Why are we so desperate to get rid of them? When the bulb is reaching its final size, it needs to start hardening off and forming those dry, papery skins that protect it in storage. There is a persistent myth that you should keep your vegetable plants green and lush for as long as humanly possible to maximize the harvest. While this is true for tomatoes or peppers, it is totally false for root crops meant for storage. If the leaves stay green and upright, the neck of the onion or garlic stays thick, fleshy, and full of water. Think of a runner who has just crossed the finish line of a marathon. If they keep sprinting at top speed, they are just wasting energy and risking injury. We need the plant to stop sprinting and cool down. A thick, wet neck is the absolute worst enemy of a stored onion or garlic bulb. It acts as an open door for rot, bacteria, and fungus to travel right down into the center of the bulb. By breaking the onion top or tying the garlic, we crush those water channels. We force the neck to dry out, flatten, and seal off the bulb tightly. This is the ultimate secret to onions and garlic that will last in your pantry for 6 or even 8 months without going soft. You might be wondering, does not the plant do this naturally? Yes, it absolutely does, and the concept is called natural lodging. In a wild or perfectly timed environment, an onion will naturally become weak at the neck and fall over when it is ready. However, a huge myth is that if your onions fall over, it means they are sick or dying from a disease. Many beginners panic when they see their onion patch suddenly laying flat on the ground. To give you an example, it is just like a tree naturally shedding its leaves in the autumn. It is a planned, healthy part of the life cycle. The problem is that in our controlled backyard gardens, we often have very rich, heavily watered soil. Because our plants are so pampered, they often stay upright much longer than they would in nature. They get lazy. Sometimes, bad weather or an early frost is approaching, and we simply do not have the time to wait for the plant to fall over on its own. If we leave them standing tall in wet soil as autumn approaches, they will rot before they ever lodge. That is exactly why we step in. We are simulating the natural lodging process, but on our own strict schedule, ensuring that the crop finishes maturing before the bad weather arrives and ruins our hard work. This leads us to the exact reason why we break onion tops manually. We are stepping in to play the role of Mother Nature, but with more precision. When we walk down the row and push the onion tops over, we are artificially inducing that crucial ripening phase. A myth that stops people from trying this is the fear that breaking the plant will cause it shock and instantly kill the bulb. The truth is, the bulb is already fully formed. We are just changing its chemical focus. Imagine you are watering your garden and you want to stop the water flow. You do not have to turn off the main valve. You can just fold the hose in half to kink it. That is exactly what we are doing to the onion neck. We are kinking the hose. We push the leaves over gently but firmly just above the bulb. We want to hear a soft crunch, not a complete snap. We do not want to tear the leaves completely off, because they still hold valuable sugars that need to slowly drain down over the next few days. By making this break, we stop the upward flow of water from the roots, and we trap the existing energy, forcing it downwards. It is a highly controlled, intentional injury that signals to the plant that its above-ground life is completely over. Timing is absolutely everything when it comes to this technique. You cannot just walk out into the garden in the middle of summer and start smashing your onions. If you do it too early, you will ruin your harvest. The myth here is that you can bend onions whenever you want them to be done growing. You cannot force an immature bulb to magically get big. You have to wait for the right visual signal. Think of it like waiting for a traffic light to turn yellow before you start slowing down. The signal you are looking for is when the very tips of the onion leaves begin to turn brown, and maybe 10 to 20% of the crop has already started to fall over naturally. This usually happens in late summer. The bulbs should look fat and be pushing themselves slightly up out of the dirt. If the necks still feel incredibly stiff and thick, like a solid pipe, they are not ready. You want the neck to feel slightly soft and hollow when you squeeze it. Once you see these signs, you have the green light. That is the perfect moment to go through and bend the rest of them over. Doing it at this precise time guarantees that you are maximizing the bulb size while securing a fast, safe curing process before the autumn rains begin. Let us talk about the actual physical technique of bending the onions, because there is a right way and a very wrong way to do it. You want to be firm but gentle. The biggest myth is that you should take a weed whacker or scissors and completely chop the green tops off to save time. Cutting the tops off while they are still green is a massive mistake. It creates a massive open wound that acts like a slide for bacteria to go straight into your onion. As an example, think of the difference between a paper cut and a deep surgical wound. We just want to bruise the plant, not amputate it. To do it correctly, take your hand, grasp the green foliage about 2 inches above the bulb, and bend it completely over until it lays flat on the ground. You want the fold to be sharp. Some old-school farmers will take an empty plastic barrel or a piece of PVC pipe and gently roll it over the tops of the entire row to bend them all uniformly. Whichever way you do it, make sure the leaves remain attached. Those leaves are going to slowly turn brown and papery over the next week or two. While they die back, they will act as a natural protective scab over the top of your onion, sealing it tight for winter storage. Before we move on to tying garlic, we have to talk about a unique feature of hardneck garlic called the scape. This is a crucial step in crop manipulation. The scape is the curly, snake-like flower stalk that shoots up from the center of the garlic plant in early summer. A very old myth suggests that you should leave the flower on the plant because it somehow helps the bulb grow by pulling up nutrients. This is scientifically backwards. The flower is actually a parasite to the bulb. To illustrate this, imagine you have a bank account and someone has stolen your debit card and is constantly withdrawing your money. The garlic scape is stealing energy to produce seeds, which means it is stealing energy away from your garlic cloves. You must cut or snap these scapes off as soon as they complete one loop or curl. By removing the scape, you instantly redirect up to 30% more energy back down into the underground bulb. Plus, garlic scapes are completely edible and taste amazing when fried in butter. So snapping them off gives you a bonus harvest in the summer and guarantees much larger garlic bulbs later in the season. Once the scapes are gone, we can focus on the leaves. Now, why do we tie garlic leaves instead of just bending them over like the onions? The reason lies in the physics and structure of the garlic plant. Unlike onions, which have hollow tubular leaves, Garlic has flat, fibrous leaves that alternate along a very stiff central stalk. A common myth is that tying garlic literally chokes the plant to death instantly. It does not. The fibers in garlic are very tough. If you just try to bend a garlic plant over, it will often just snap back up straight like a spring, or the stalk will shatter completely, leaving an open wound. To give you a good visual, think about braiding long hair. You braid hair to manage it and keep it out of the way without cutting it off. By taking the top leaves of the garlic and tying them into a simple overhand knot, we are managing that stiff foliage. The knot creates a gentle, continuous tension. It kinks the internal pathways just enough to restrict the upward flow of energy, but not so violently that the stalk snaps in half. This gentle restriction is exactly what the garlic needs to realize that it is time to stop maintaining its tall posture and focus on plumping up those individual cloves underground. The history of the garlic knot is absolutely fascinating and deeply rooted in Old World European traditions. If you travel through small villages in Eastern Europe or the Mediterranean, you will still see fields of knotted garlic today. For a long time, there was a myth in Western gardening circles that tying garlic was just a silly superstition or folklore to ward off evil spirits, and that it had no basis in actual plant science. But these old traditions usually exist for a very practical reason. Think of grandmothers passing down a family recipe. They might not know the exact chemical reactions happening in the oven, but they know exactly how to bake the perfect loaf of bread. These traditional farmers noticed over generations that knotted garlic matured faster, had tighter skins, and lasted much longer in the root cellar through the freezing winters. Modern agriculture has finally confirmed that this mechanical stress does indeed hasten the drying process of the neck and redirects carbohydrates. So, when you are out in your backyard tying knots in your plants, you are not just performing a random trick. You are participating in hundreds of years of proven, historical agricultural practice. Timing the garlic twist is just as critical as timing the onion bend. It requires a watchful eye. A disastrous myth is that you should tie your garlic as soon as the plants get tall and look healthy in early summer. If you tie them too early, you will completely stunt the growth and your bulbs will be the size of marbles. You have to wait for the garlic to naturally begin its decline. A perfect example is a baker taking a cake out of the oven. You do not take it out when it is still liquid batter. You wait for the edges to turn golden brown. For garlic, you start counting the leaves from the bottom up. When the bottom 3 or 4 leaves have turned completely brown and crispy, but the top 5 or 6 leaves are still green, that is your golden window. This usually happens about 2 to 3 weeks before you plan to harvest them from the ground. The brown lower leaves tell you that the bulb is fully sized and the plant has naturally begun to shut down. Tying the knot at this exact moment accelerates that final shutdown process, forcing the remaining green energy downwards and encouraging the papery wrappers around the cloves to shrink wrap tightly against the bulb. Let us walk through the step-by-step process of how to actually tie the garlic leaves. It is very simple, but you need a gentle touch. The myth that intimidates people is that you need special tools, clips, or a complicated Boy Scout knot to get this done. You do not need anything but your bare hands. It is exactly like tying a simple shoelace knot, but without the bow. Take the top cluster of green leaves, usually the top 4 to 6 leaves, in your hands. Gently gather them together so they form a single bundle. Carefully loop the bundle around itself and pull the end through the hole to make a basic overhand knot. Pull it snug, but do not yank it so hard that the leaves tear away from the main stalk. If the leaves are a bit too short or stiff to tie a full knot, which sometimes happens with certain hardneck varieties, you can simply twist them tightly together like a rope and fold the twist over. The goal is just to create a physical kink in the upper foliage. Once you get the hang of it, you can walk down a row of 50 garlic plants and have them all knotted in less than 5 minutes. It is a very peaceful, satisfying garden chore that yields massive results. There is a secondary, highly beneficial reason for tying your garlic that involves weather factors and disease prevention. By tying the top foliage into a compact knot, you drastically change the shape of the plant. A very common myth is that tying the leaves together traps moisture and causes mold. In reality, the exact opposite is true. When garlic leaves are left straight and open, they can act like a funnel, catching rain and morning dew, channeling the water right down the center stalk and into the bulb. Think of an open window during a rainstorm. You want to close the window to keep the house dry. Tying the knot closes the top of the plant. It prevents water from pooling in the neck. Furthermore, by making the tops compact, you massively increase the airflow between the plants in your garden bed. Good airflow is the #1 defense against fungal diseases like rust or mildew, which thrive in dense, damp foliage. So, by knotting your garlic, you are not only feeding the bulb, you are actively protecting the plant from late-season rot and ensuring a much healthier environment in the garden bed as the summer humidity rises. Let us look at how this technique impacts the drying and curing process, which is the most critical step for long-term storage. We do not just want big bulbs, we want bulbs that will last until next spring. The myth that ruins many harvests is the belief that the curing process only begins after you pull the plant out of the dirt. That is completely false. Curing actually begins while the plant is still in the ground. To use an example, it is like preheating an oven before you put the food in. By breaking the onion necks and tying the garlic leaves, you are pre-curing your harvest. You are forcing the neck of the plant to dry out and collapse weeks earlier than it would naturally. This means that when harvest day finally arrives, and you pull the bulbs out to hang in your shed, half the drying work is already done. The necks will already be sealed tight, meaning the risk of rot creeping into the bulb while it hangs in the shed is practically zero. This advanced curing technique guarantees those tight, crackly, paper-thin skins that you see on premium, organic supermarket garlic and onions. It is the ultimate difference between a crop that rots in October and a crop you are still eating in March. To fully appreciate this trick, we need to understand the nutrient rerouting mechanics that happen deep inside the plant's chemistry. When you inflict this specific mechanical stress, a massive chemical shift occurs inside the stalk. The myth is that the green leaves just instantly die and turn to dust when you bend them. They do not die instantly. Instead, they go into emergency liquidation mode. Imagine a business that is closing down. They do not just throw their expensive inventory in the trash. They hold a liquidation sale and move all the cash into the company safe. The leaves slowly begin to break down their own chlorophyll and complex carbohydrates. The plant panics slightly and pumps all of those broken down, valuable nutrients down the internal highway directly into the bulb, which acts as the safe. Over a period of 10 to 14 days, you will watch the folded onion tops or the knotted garlic leaves slowly drain of color, turning from vibrant green to yellow, and finally to a crispy brown. This slow, agonizing color change is visual proof that every last drop of goodness is being squeezed out of the useless top growth and packed tightly into your future dinner. If you are still skeptical, let us compare the yields of treated beds versus untreated beds. I have done this experiment many times in my own backyard. The biggest myth propagated by lazy gardeners is that all this bending and tying makes absolutely no measurable difference and is just a waste of time. I can assure you, the difference is night and day. If you run a side-by-side test, leaving one row of onions standing straight up and bending the other row over, the results at harvest will shock you. It is exactly like a blind taste and weight test. The onions that were bent over will consistently weigh 20 to 30% more. They will be noticeably wider, denser, and heavier in your hand. The unbent onions will often have thick, green necks and feel a bit squishy, meaning they are full of water, not solid layers. The tied garlic will have fat, bulging cloves that threaten to burst through the wrappers, while the untied garlic will look skinny and undeveloped in comparison. The physical evidence is undeniable. A few minutes of effort out in the sun translates to pounds and pounds of extra, high-quality food for your family. Of course, there are some common beginner mistakes that you need to avoid so you do not ruin your crop. The most frequent mistake is thinking that if a little bend is good, a hard smash is better. The myth here is that the plant needs to be completely crushed to get the message. As I mentioned before, you want a gentle fold, not a violent break. If you stomp on your onions with your boots or pull your garlic knots so tight that the leaves rip off the stem, you have failed. To give you a practical example, it is like over-tightening a screw until the threads strip out completely. If you break the skin of the stalk and expose the wet inside to the air, insects and soil bacteria will immediately invade the plant and rot the bulb from the inside out. You must be gentle. You are trying to restrict the flow, not amputate the limbs. Take your time, use your hands, and feel the plant yield to your pressure. Another mistake is doing it while the plants are wet from morning dew or rain. Always bend and tie your plants in the dry heat of the mid-afternoon, when the leaves are flexible and the risk of spreading fungal spores is at its absolute lowest. Finally, we must discuss the absolute most important rule regarding soil moisture management during this final phase. All the bending and tying in the world will not help you if you mess up the watering schedule. The deadliest myth in root crop gardening is the idea that to get giant bulbs, you need to water the plants heavily right up until the day you pull them out of the ground. This is a recipe for total disaster. Think of a sponge that needs to dry out completely. If you keep dripping water on it, it will just get moldy. Once you bend your onion tops or tie your garlic, you must immediately stop all watering. Turn off the drip tape, put away the hose, and hope for no rain. The plants are in their shutdown phase. They do not want water and they cannot use it. If the soil remains soaking wet while the necks are trying to dry out, the bulbs will literally rot in the mud. By cutting off the water supply at the exact same time you manipulate the tops, you create the perfect, dry, stressful environment that forces the bulbs to cure, harden, and wrap themselves in those protective, papery skins. Dry dirt is the final ingredient to a perfect harvest. So there you have it, the weird, wonderful, and highly effective secrets of breaking onion tops and tying garlic leaves. What seems like a chaotic or destructive gardening practice is actually a finely tuned, historically proven method of hacking the plant's natural energy system. By gently kinking the onion necks and knotting the stiff garlic leaves at the exact right moment, you are stopping the production of useless green foliage and forcing every last drop of sunshine, water, and nutrients straight down into the bulbs. You are essentially pre-curing your harvest, protecting them from rot, and guaranteeing much larger, denser, and longer-lasting vegetables for your pantry. It is amazing how much power we have to guide nature just by using our bare hands and a little bit of timing. Now, it is time for you to get out there and try this in your own dirt. If you learned something new today and want to keep maximizing your garden yields, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. It really helps the channel grow. Now I have a question for you to answer down in the comments. Are you going to try the garlic knot this season? Or are you still too nervous to bend your plants? Let me know and I will see you in the next video.